You're listening to Talking Africa, the podcast that gets behind the news from the continent, brought to you by the Africa Report. My name is Nick Norbrook. Welcome to the show. For our latest reporting, head to theafricareport.com. It's still free as a bird. It won't be forever, so get stuck in. Our interview with President Kagame, the latest on the rescue of South African Airways, it's all there. How are you? Are you well? I haven't spoken to you for a few weeks. I hope you're doing okay. My guest this week was driving home one night when passing gunmen sprayed over 30 rounds into his car. 5 bullets hit him. He barely survived and went into exile. Now Tanzania's opposition leader, Tundu Lissu, is heading home to take part in October's election. The government, as you might suspect, is not making things easy for him.
Well, in terms of security, nothing has changed. The government of Tanzania has refused to give any guarantees of my security, in spite of writing to them twice in the past 6 months or so. They have not even acknowledged our letters. So in terms of security, nothing has changed.
How has Magufuli changed Tanzania?
President Magufuli has changed Tanzania in many ways than one. The country is much more fearful now. The people are afraid in a way they have never been afraid since the 1980s, actually. Since the 1985, when we got our Bill of Rights for the first time. Prior to 1985, we lived in fear of the Securitate all the time. And after the introduction of Bill of Rights in 1985, the atmosphere became much freer. And especially more so during the era of multi-party system, which started in 1992. Now, President Magufuli has taken us back to the years of fear that were characteristic of the one-party state in the 1960s, 70s, and early 80s. And secondly, President Magufuli has changed Tanzania economically. The president believes in the command and control economic philosophy that was in place in the period 1967 to 1984. And in the 80s, it had become a spectacular disaster, and it was abandoned in 1984. Magufuli wants to take us back to that period of time when the government controlled every aspect of our economic lives. Those are only some of the ways in which the president has changed the country. The other aspect is with regard to rule of law and democracy. He does not believe in multi-party democracy. He has said it on a number of occasions publicly that he would like to see Tanzania reverting back to the dark days of one-party rule, and he has done a lot to see that vision come to fruition. The fact that I've been in exile these past 3 years.
What drives him? Is it purely political power? Is it this ideological conviction of the 1970s? Or is there, as others have suggested, a network of business people around him, more or less opaque, who are shoring up the regime?
I cannot say anything about the business people because I know none. And I can almost say with certainty that it has nothing to do with ideology, because if you ask Magufuli what is right or left in political terms, he will never be able to tell you. He doesn't know those things. And therefore, the only thing that drives him is pure power, pure and simple. He is a control freak. I served with him in parliament for 5 years, and I can tell you the man doesn't have a skin. It's not a question of having a thin skin for criticism. He doesn't have any skin whatsoever. So anything you say that he doesn't like, he takes it personally.
How do you explain his attempt to take on the foreign mining companies in Tanzania? What do you make of the Barrick deal, for example?
It basically the same mode. He wants the money, and he will take the money if he can.
So, for example, the war on corruption is more about generating revenue?
Absolutely. Shakedown. It's a mafia shakedown.
If you're elected president, Mr. Lissu, what would you do in your first 100 days in office?
Basically, do everything exactly opposite to what we have seen Magufuli doing this past 5 years. Number one, restore democracy and civil liberties. Number two, restore rule of law, government accountability, free press. Number three, get the government off the economy. The government has no business trying to see who will wear a pair of pants and who will not.
I mean, on the economy, the World Bank recently said that Tanzania is going to join the ranks of middle-income countries earlier than predicted. That doesn't sound like an economy that's totally off the rails.
The World Bank is totally incredulous in that regard. They simply don't know what is going on. Tanzanians are much poorer today than they have ever been in the past 2 decades.
In a recent interview with President Kagame, I asked him whether or not he was getting the response he wanted from the neighbors. And without naming names, he expressed frustration. Some of his neighbors in East Africa for their lack of attention paid to the COVID-19 pandemic. Is COVID-19 under control in Tanzania?
Well, if you believe President Magufuli, Tanzania is COVID-19 free. The truth, however, is elsewhere. We have not released any figures. The government has refused to release any figures on infections, on recoveries, on fatalities since April 29th. So our way of fighting COVID-19 is not talking about it.
How are you and how is Chadema going to campaign, given that rallies are banned?
We hope that because the election laws are very clear that campaigns have to be carried out for 70 days prior to the election, we hope we'll be allowed to campaign in accordance with the law.
What do you and Chadema stand for now, apart from democracy, which has been so much of a part of your platform? What are the other things that you really stand for?
We stand for a social market economy, for a private sector-led economic growth, for a government that takes care of the regulatory side of economic activity. We also stand for government provisioning, providing services for people who may not be able to afford the basic services for one reason or the other, among many other things, of course.
Edward Lowassa was Chadema's candidate in 2015. He's now vocally supporting Magufuli. What would you say to him?
We know what took Edward Lowassa back. He was hit hard personally. His business interests were seized. His family were personally targeted, and the old man just couldn't take it, and he ran back to where he always was. And we are fine without him.
Tell us a little bit about your alliance with oppositionists in Zanzibar. How much of their agenda do you share?
We share quite a bit. You can imagine in 2015, for the first time, we went together in a coalition, and 2015 was our best year by far. We are working on fielding a joint platform this time, and we hope things will be much, much better than 2015.
So there will be a national opposition alliance?
We are talking about it.
What about those who say, some of these Zanzibari oppositionists have more of an Islamist agenda? Are you concerned that might be used against you?
Well, those who wish to portray Zanzibari nationalists in those lights are entitled to their opinion. What we know for sure is the Zanzibari nationalists that we have associated with and who we support are fighting for a substantially autonomous Zanzibar. They are fighting for Zanzibar that is has a more equal unity with the Tanzania mainland, and that has not been the case since 1964.
What do you think about the insurgency in Mozambique's Cabo Delgado? Are you worried it might blow back into southern Tanzania and back up the coast?
I think that threat is minimal. It is overblown by people who want to hide behind Islamist insurgency in Mozambique to do other things. It is not a threat. It is not a threat in Tanzania.
What do you think about the response from the African Union, from the East African community, to the threats faced by the Tanzanian opposition?
Well, we obviously would like to see the European Union, the East African Community, Africa Union, and the international friends of Tanzania do more. We would like to see them do more.
Right now, the African Union and the EAC are relatively silent, be it to threats on opposition leaders in Uganda or in Ethiopia or in Tanzania.
Yeah, they are. That's why we expect them. We would like to see them do more.
Who do you feel are the sort of the regional supporters of President Magufuli? Is it Museveni? Is it Raila Odinga?
From what I can see, in these past 5 years under Magufuli, we have frittered away our international friendships. Fuli's dependable friend used to be Pierre Nkurunziza in Burundi, and now that has been failed by COVID-19, cannot speak of any other friend that he has in the region.
Are there any other issues you wanted to cover, Mr. Lissu?
I want to say one or two things. Number one is this election in October of 2020 will be the most important election in Tanzania's history. And the reason is it is very likely that if Magufuli wins, and he wins with a substantial majority, he will turn the country upside down in ways in which the country may end up with economic and political chaos that have afflicted other countries in the region. And Tanzania has always absorbed the shocks of the region since the 1960s, be it in the Congo during the Lumumbist rebellion in the early 60s, or Burundi and Rwanda, and all this stuff, Uganda in the 70s. If Tanzania is allowed to slide into chaos, you can imagine what will happen to the rest of the region. So this election is absolutely important. Our friends in the international community have every reason to see to it that this government is not allowed to lead Tanzania into that disaster.
How can we explain the continued popularity of President Magufuli in the rural areas of Tanzania? And what would be your strategy to try